Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, June 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 67 days, the game against Michigan in 158 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. Going to be taking a little bit of a look ahead at the 2025 Ohio State football season on today's show. Going to be doing that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony has been writing a series 50 for 50, counting down to the unofficial start of the college football season, Big Ten Media Days. It is a daily series at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and part of that has been having some predictions for this year's Ohio State team. Some of them have been bolder than others. If you have followed our bold prediction show, you know that's always true of Tony. The show, we're going to do 3 or 4 of them. These are pretty good. I like all of these, so that felt unusual enough that I was like, we should do a show specifically with you making predictions that are somewhat bold. Never before in the history of podcasting. So, Tony, welcome. Let's start with the first one about an Ohio State true freshman, Devin Sanchez. You say will have 2+ interceptions. Dante Whitner, the last true freshman, do that all the way back in 2003. William White was the last true freshman cornerback to do it in 1984. So it has been a minute. So, Tony, what makes you think that Devin Sanchez is a unique enough player to make that happen this year?
Well, because he's a unique enough player to make that happen this year, Tom. Like, that's basically I've answered your question with the question.
Dynamite drop in, Tony.
He is an elite prospect, as we know, but I do think we saw him in the 2 deep for the Buckeyes and in the spring, and he's going to play plenty, and he's certainly going to be wanting to make his mark when he's out there. And also there'll be times when he's out there where maybe he's not playing the best competition in terms of it might be more of a blowout at times. So you're dealing with quarterbacks who are throwing the ball around, trying to play catch up. And so I think he might have more opportunities than your standard backup. And to call him a backup, we don't even know if that's necessarily the case at this point. He could be in the rotation, which would only help his matters. So I think he's going to have some opportunities. I think it is when you say, like, when I first write it down, like, yeah, let's say Devin Sanchez with 2 interceptions. Like, well, when was the last time a freshman did that? And it's like, I'm going through, and it's like, there's a ton with 1, and, like Rod J. Burns had a 75-yard interception return, back in 2017 or whatever, 2016. It's like, there's a lot of guys with 1, like A.J. Hawk in 2002 may have had 2, but in terms of like defensive backs, yeah, Dante Whitner, you had to go all the way back to 2003. And then it's like, well, what about corners? Because that's really what we're talking about. And as you said, you got to go back over 40 years. So this may be the boldest prediction that has ever gone from you said it. So this is certainly the boldest prediction that has ever come out of your mouth, basically. So it's just no coincidence that it's one of my predictions that made it so.
You're talking about something that's happened in 2003, 1984. Think about, Tony, the number of predictions that I've made that involve not since Rutgers and Princeton in 1869. Dozens, hundreds, dozens of times a week in some cases. I mean, you got to. I think everyone recognizes the gaslighting that's going on right now. Nonetheless, a very good one, and one that I agree with you, where you're going to have potentially a lot of opportunities in the second half against, Ohio State's 2s. The gap between Ohio State's 1s and Grambling State's 1s is going to be really significant. The gap between Ohio State's 2s and Grambling State's 2s is going to be perhaps even bigger in some ways. And, you're going to have young quarterbacks and young wide receivers out there, and Devin Sanchez probably going to be significantly ahead. So yeah, I think I like this one a lot, where you could get 1 in that game, and then you get, 1 other at some point. He's going to be playing a lot, I think. Going to be in that rotation. Jermaine Matthews and Davison Igbinosun, presumably the starters this year and returning starters. Aaron Scott, obviously, in that mix, and Devin Sanchez in that mix as well. So they're going to see reps. I think this is a very good one. Next one, boy, this is another one that you write it down, and it's like, yeah, okay, sure, maybe. I mean, that sounds like something that happens every 3 years or so. 3 Ohio State quarterbacks will throw 2+ touchdown passes. I want everyone at home to take a second and think back. Okay, how long has it been since that happened? I mean, maybe it was 2016, or maybe it was 2017. I mean, certainly this has happened a bunch, right? 1995. I will give you now a minute to think about which quarterbacks were even on the roster in 1995. And who would have done this? I would not have come up with the third one. I would have come up with the first two, which is Bobby Hoying and Stan Jackson. Those are names you probably would have come up with. Tommy Hoying, the third quarterback to do it, has not happened since 1995. This feels like one that we probably predict this time every year. How has this not happened in 30 years?
And really, to even get a second quarterback with 2 touchdown passes is kind of a rare thing. It's crazy that Chris Jugganoff threw 5 or 6 in his one season with the Buckeyes. But now, I think this year you're going to have clearly the starter will do it, and you would think there's every opportunity for the backup to do it. But the key is the third guy, Tavian St. Clair. You would think once he gets into a game, they'd like to let him throw the ball a little bit, and that's not something they've necessarily done in the past. Because we remember when C.J. Stroud didn't even throw the ball as a redshirt freshman or as a true freshman. Devin Brown, I don't think, threw the ball at all as a true freshman. Julian Sain finally got to throw the ball a little bit last year. We know Kyle McCord threw the ball as a true freshman. He started a game for crying out loud. But I think this maybe you're advancing to the point of you can't bring freshmen along as slowly as you used to. So while they're out there, let them throw the ball around. Everybody's paying good money for the players. Everybody's paying good money for the opponents. Basically, you're bringing 3 opponents in. Let your quarterbacks throw the ball around against them. Let them throw the ball around against Texas. Let Tavian throw the ball against the Longhorns. But I think you'll have some of those opportunities. And shoot, who knows? Maybe St. Clair will get his 2 out against Grambling. I'm not expecting that because that's going to be really late in the game. But as I'm talking more and more, I'm thinking, boy, this sounds very, very unlikely. Just because it's so rare. But I do think they're going to want to allow Tavian St. Clair to throw the ball.
Yeah, you could see this happening in a way that's a very good thing for Ohio State, where they're up by a bunch and Tavian St. Clair is really coming along very, very well, and you can give him you trust him with reps earlier in the game than you might have otherwise, or you can see this happening in a way that's very, very bad, where you have a bunch of injuries. Like I think a lot of times if you have 3 quarterbacks who throw for 2-3 touchdown passes, that's probably you're down on your Maryland probably had a year like that, the year that they ended up with like a linebacker playing quarterback, 5-10 years ago at this point. So, it could be a very positive or a very, very negative thing if that happens. We'll see. Again, I would have guessed that happened 10 times in the last 30 years. It has happened 0 times in the last 30 years. So there you go. So, all right, that's a good one. Next up, Brandon Innis will account for touchdowns 3 different ways. We were sort of brainstorming before the show. The answer we landed on in terms of the last time, this is not as easily searchable as some of the other stuff. The answer we landed on in terms of the most recent time it probably happened was Jalen Marshall in 2014, where he had a rushing touchdown, a number of receiving touchdowns, and had a punt return touchdown against Indiana. And then Ohio State didn't have a punt return touchdown for 10 years until Caleb Downs did it in 2024. I want to talk to you about Caleb Downs in this category in a minute, because I think I should get the plus 10,000 on a Caleb Downs prediction, scoring 3 different ways. But Brandon Innis accounting for touchdowns 3 different ways this season. Yeah, I could absolutely see it. I think he's going to be someone they're going to be trying to get the ball to in a bunch of different ways. But in this one, again, this is something that feels like it should happen more often than it apparently does.
Especially when you've got a weapon that you want to utilize. And granted, Brandon Innis this is his 3rd year, so he's waited to be utilized. But with just the lack of punt returns and kickoff returns, I think has really made this a difficult thing to do. It was, I think, much more common, or I don't know, much less rare back in the day. I think there's also one other avenue to keep an eye out for, Tom, and that is Brandon Innis can throw the ball. He threw the ball in high school, so you could see some jet sweep type action where he gets it and he throws it. So I didn't want to say 4 ways, but I'm saying I've got 4 different ways for him to score 3 touchdowns, or to count for 3 touchdowns. And so that helps my argument out a little bit. But I honestly don't know. I would probably take throwing a touchdown pass over returning a punt as more likely this year for Brandon Innis, just because the punt return has been such an anomaly for Ohio State.
Yeah, I like that one. The other thing that we talked about was, maybe a quarterback catches a touchdown pass, something like that. And you have seen that in the past. We couldn't come up with anything more recent than Terrell Pryor in the Fiesta Bowl against Texas, for an Ohio State quarterback catching a touchdown pass. But there are ways to do this. The rush for a touchdown, throw for a touchdown, catch a touchdown. That is the Michael Wiley hat trick. If we're going to do this, and name this for an Ohio State player of the past. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I would like, if we're going to do this as a season bold predictions, I would like 10 points for Caleb Downs does this, scores touchdown 3 separate ways. I think the window has closed on the Caleb Downs running back experiment at Ohio State. That always seemed like a very unlikely thing and has only gotten less likely as Carlos Lachlan has bolstered the numbers in that room quite a bit. But, I mean, you're telling me Caleb Downs can't get a scoop and score and a pick six and a punt return this year? The odds of any of those individually are probably like a plus 500, something like that. So you can parlay 3 plus 500s. You're ending up with some kind of a pretty big number there. But, if I think he's someone he's not at the top of the list of the most likely, but if you're going to factor in odds on this, I think he might not be a bad bet just value wise to do it, just because if there's a loose football, he's pretty fast. He's pretty elusive. He's got a great sense for the game, so he's going to be able to find open field. I would not bet against him doing that, and not likely, like I said. But you telling me you can't see it?
No, I can definitely see it. And as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, imagine like Draymond Jones back in the day, if they would have had him as a goal line tight end at some point, because we saw him intercept passes and, pick up, fumbles. I think he would have been a dynamic goal line tight end that could have gotten involved. But there are ways for a defensive guy to do this without being involved in offense. And I think you could make a solid bet. Each of those 3 things would be like, that seems like money well bet. And again, we're not talking gambling, but like, it doesn't seem like you're throwing away money, basically. All 3. Now you're playing with fire, and well, look, I'm just trying to have some fun and hit a big parlay. But certainly, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, and would definitely be worth 5.
Yeah, it's more than 5, but that's fine. We'll maybe have a season. Well, maybe he says. We will absolutely positively have a season-long bold prediction show at some point, and we'll have a conversation about whether that's worth 10 or 20 or whatever. But all right, so we'll get there. But first of all, let's get to your last one. Sonny Styles will lead Ohio State in sacks. Absolutely could see it happening, and this is another one where the last time it happened, 20 years ago, A.J. Hawk was the last Ohio State linebacker to do that. That's another incredible number, incredible stat.
Yeah, well, it helps to have had Ohio State's defensive ends that they've had over the last, 20 years, but also some of these linebackers and really other linebackers have had opportunities where the leader in sacks has been like 4.5 before in recent time. And I'm just wondering what Matt Patricia is going to do with Sonny Styles. And, we saw Cody Simon come close to it last year with his attacking style. Sonny Styles, and I guess what they're going to do with him, we assume he's going to be doing some blitzing as he did last year. I think the other part of this is, how deep is this 5-man defensive end rotation? And is it so deep that the leading sacker among the defensive ends has like 6.5? And if there's like 3 guys with 6.5, Ohio State would take that in a heartbeat. Be like, look at all of these productive, consistent defensive ends. And then you've got Sonny Styles, slow and steady wins the race, comes in with, another 8.5 or 9 sacks to lead the team. I think that is a real possibility. And I don't think it's, again, these are not necessarily likely. These are relatively bold. Sonny Styles had 6 sacks last year. Cody Simon had 7. JT Tuimoloau 12.5, Jack Sawyer 9. So the linebackers are going to have to do some work. But we've seen in past years where if this rotation is overly deep, then certainly a linebacker can come in and steal the glory, steal the team lead. So I think just keep an eye out on this one.
I like this one because I mean, you mentioned 12 for JT Tuimoloau, 9.5 for Jack Sawyer net last year. This doesn't feel like a year where Ohio State's going to have a couple guys knocking on the door at 10 sacks. This feels like a year where they're much more likely to have 4 guys with 5 sacks rather than 2 guys with 10 sacks. It just feels like you're going to be rotating a decent amount at the defensive end positions. They feel, they feel pretty good about at the interior of the defensive line, but you can be an interior defensive lineman and have 5 sacks or 6 sacks, and that's a monster season from a defensive tackle. So, you're not Ndamukong Suh, so you're not going to be putting up 10 sacks from a defensive tackle position. So you might be able to just, you're winning the AL Central with 85 wins because there's a lot of 81 win teams there, and so you don't need to pile up Chase Young numbers or Nick Bosa numbers or Joey Bosa numbers. You can just be part of a really deep and sort of balanced defensive attack. And as to your point with Matt Patricia, what is this defense going to look like? We really didn't see a whole heck of a lot this spring in terms of what they were showing and really understanding exactly what he's going to do. You know what he did in the pros, but that's not necessarily you're going to. I mean, how often did he talk this spring about you got to look at what you got personnel wise and you sort of shape it around that? I don't know that they have the one guy who's going to be the, I'm a big believer in several of those guys on the defensive line. I just don't know that you have a Chase Young there. So you're probably going to have a little bit more of a balanced thing. So that does make it more likely you end up with someone unusual leading the team in sacks. So, all right. So there you go. 4 very bold predictions from Mr. Tony Gerdeman for the 2025 Ohio State football season. All pretty bold, all pretty plausible. So good balance there. Some interesting stuff there. We're going to be talking much more about the 2025 Ohio State football team at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We've got our whole team of insiders covering that. We've got our whole team of insiders covering recruiting. We got all our X's and O's guys as there as well, all to make you a smarter football fan. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And also make sure you check us out at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Going to be lots of news coming in the next few days, the next few weeks. Potentially a number of guys on commitment watch for the Buckeyes. A lot of drama in the recruiting world right now. We're covering it all for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.